Canadian Embassy in London. We expect, I think, one of the senior diplomats, maybe the ambassador in a moment, to be coming out and getting in his car. So it's probably a very fitting time for us to have a protest here. We are here literally within weeks of the end of the 2016 seal culls. If you'd have come into this square 40 years ago, you would have seen the origins of the animal rights movement in Britain campaigning against the culling of seals in Newfoundland and Labrador. You would have seen people like Spike Milligan and Joanna Lumley and thousands of people. Over 40 years later, we're still having to tell the Canadian government there is no justification in killing thousands and thousands of harp seals and grey seals in Newfoundland and Labrador. Why, oh why, is this horrible poor business going on? Well, let's be clear about a few things. Firstly, there is no global marketplace for seal products. The European Union since 2009 has told the Canadian government that European consumers, you, me and everyone else in Britain and other countries in Europe, don't want to buy seal products. Now that was a ground-mark decision for Europe because that was taken on ethical grounds. Okay, the European Union decided to ban seal products because people living in Europe knew that this is a cruel trade and there's no justification for it. Now the Canadian government took the European Union to the World Trade Organization in 2014 to get that ban lifted, and they failed. Quite rightly they failed, and it stays in place. The United States has put restrictions on Canadian seal products. Many other countries around the world have done the same. And the crazy thing now is that this business is worth a tiny amount of the money that it used to be 20 or 30 years ago. If you went back over a decade, there were 6,000 fishermen killing seals every year in Newfoundland and Labrador. Today, there's less than 400. The export market is worth a few million pounds. And the Canadian government spends tens of millions of pounds monitoring this madness every year. Now, if you think you can monitor the humaneness of killing seals in the vast areas of Newfoundland and Labrador, you're kidding yourself. You can't. If the government in Britain have problems monitoring the killing of badgers in Gloucestershire and Somerset, how can the Canadian government monitor the killing of seals in areas that are bigger than the geographical size of France? That's how big you're talking about. And what we do know from independent veterinary research carried out by respected scientific organisations is that over 50% of the seals that are killed, often even when they're being skinned, are still alive. They're still conscious. When they've been clubbed to death, they're not dead. Okay? They're dragging these seals across the ice floe, they're splitting open their stomachs, and these animals are still alive. They're killing seals that are little more than 3 months old. The only restriction is not killing seals less than 3 months old. They go for the youngest animals that have the softest pelts that they then can sell the fur. This is a horrible, horrible, cruel business. The other great lie that's told by the Canadian government and the Canadian seal industry is that you actually find that seals affect fish stocks. Let's be clear. The fish stocks collapsed off Newfoundland's Grand Banks, not because of seals, because of humans overfishing them. Okay, we fish those stocks year in, year out for decades to the point where they completely and utterly collapsed. That was a wake-up call for the rest of the world. We have seen significant restrictions on fishing put into those areas now for over a decade. And we're starting to see fish numbers come back up. But they're coming back up as the seal numbers are very, very strong as well. So there's not a direct connection between having large seal populations and having vibrant fish stocks. They can both survive together. We do know that if man overfishes, they collapse. The other thing we do know is that seals are suffering as a consequence of climate change. So as the ice melts around the Arctic region, the seals find it more difficult to breed, they find it more difficult to feed. And because we're killing large numbers of young seals every year, there is increasing concern in the scientific community that it will have a long-term impact on their overall numbers. Now, the Canadian government say, well, seal numbers are going up. Yes, they have gone up. There's probably about 7 million seals in the area of Newfoundland and Labrador today. But if you went back to the 1950s and 60s, that figure had fallen below 1 million. So they've come back from a very, very dangerous position because we had to put in significant restrictions on their killing. And that does not justify going back to butchery again. Seal culling is cruel. Seal culling does not justify anything economically for the people killing these animals. There is no market for these goods anymore. This shames Canada, it shames the world, it should stop, and it's the real good example of how ignorance, greed and exploitation can continue to feed a horrible, horrible business. And when you see a government like Canada going out of their way to make propaganda and to intimidate protest movements that want to stop this, that's an absolute disgrace. Now, Justin Trudeau is a young, vibrant leader of Canada that many people had great hope for when he was elected. He has been lobbied by lots of people in recent months to bring an end to this trade. So far, he has refused. What we must do, and what people around the world must do, is keep the pressure upon him, keep the pressure upon the Canadian people. Now, polls will show us that over 80% of people in Canada don't want seal culling. Over 80% of people in Canada are happy to see the European Union ban seal products. The vast majority of Canadian people feel this is an embarrassment to them as a nation, and this should end. That's why we've got to keep fighting. Those people that started this campaign 40, 45 years ago were right. 45 years on, we've got to keep fighting it. We will bring this to a close. I think we're getting close to stopping this madness. I think no longer does it weigh up economically, no longer can you defend it humanely. We know that scientifically it's cruel as well. And we know because of climate change that actually unless we really start to address what we do with the world seal population, it will continue to decline. So keep fighting. It's great to be here today. We want to build this into a bigger campaign. I'd like to see I4 come back, because I4 was the organisation that started this. That's what it gave birth to as an NGO, so they should be back here. I'd like to see the Humane Society back here, because they're doing an awful lot of this in America and Canada too. And Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth and other charities. I think what we've got to do is get them back in this place with larger numbers of people to put pressure on this government to stop this horror, to make sure this comes to an end. Thank you very much.